Oh, back, aren't we?
We certainly are.
We are.
Second time we're recording that because I messed the intro up, but we'll go again. How's everyone?
Very well,
Yeah,
thank
really
you.
Apparently, we can only introduce this guest once with this official title, Paul.
I'm going to. So, just like to welcome Dr. Chris Westerby. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks ever so much for inviting me.
And thanks for being on, Chris. So I did that.
Yeah, Chris.
Well done, well done, well done.
No, straight onto it.
Good afternoon, Joe.
Good afternoon, Paul. How are you? You look very well.
Oh, very well, thank you. And how are you, Leon?
Good. No, I'm going to call you Dr. Chris just once. I just think it's awesome. What was interesting was, I'll call you out on it. Why do you want us to call you Dr. Chris? Because I think it's something you should be so proud of. It's an amazing achievement. If I was a doctor, I'd insist you all call me doctor. Would you?
Yeah.
Would you?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
No.
So
My partner insists on writing Dr. Chris whenever we're applying for anything, whether it's like for a bank or signing up for something. So then I'll suddenly find some kind of letter will come through saying Dr. Chris, and it's still really weird to me. I think maybe that's why I'm still not really used to it.
How
But
long have you been a doctor then? How long?
since July 7th, 2019,
Wow.
officially,
okay.
and yeah, it still feels really strange, very
And
strange.
he did say, I know you're not saying it now, but you actually just said that it's that imposter syndrome as well.
It is, yeah. Like I think there's something about taking a PhD, about being and completing one and being a doctor, that means, yeah, you've done something really cool. You should be really proud of it. But I also feel very aware that it's about something so specific that I don't know. I don't know. I never know what else it applies to. I never
Yeah.
know where else the term would be relevant. So I tend never just to mention it whatsoever in general conversation.
No, it's very cool.
I think it's very cool. Very cool. And so I think we're just going to jump straight into the questions and see where we go. Do you think, Joe?
Okay. Shall I go first?
You go first, ladies first.
Okay, so Chris, what are the 1 to 3 books that have greatly changed or influenced your life?
This one, I felt like I had some pressure because I come from a background of studying English and creative writing and stuff. And so I was thinking, what are my favorite books, or what are the ones that have influenced me the most? And as the question was about influenced me the most, I think, especially when it comes down to things like mental health, that was a really difficult thing to think about, because I've also read, obviously, many books by people perhaps in similar positions to myself who want to write from experience of what they've been through. But I was thinking about what specifically actually changed my life when I read it. And I think firstly, I would point to one book, and then it led into 2 books that was recommended to me when I was about 23. One of them's called Wherever You Go, There You Are. The other one's called Full Catastrophe Living, both of which are by John Kabat-Zinn. And just as I was being recommended these, I was going through acceptance commitment therapy. So I was being taught the values of things like mindfulness. They were never quite steering me in the direction of meditation, but other people were starting to. Particularly, it's becoming more and more popular here in the West, as just as a means of coping with the absolute hectic day-to-day life for many of us who are suffering from different forms of mental health challenges. And for me, who has a mental health condition, which means I spend too much of my time focused inwards and I can't escape that. And even though it's very much pertains to what's happening around me, my mind is too trapped up in catastrophizing and thinking of different sort of scenarios that I'm afraid of. Mindfulness was a way for me to try and pay more attention to the surroundings and hence snap out of whatever it is that I'm thinking about, even if it's just for a second. And so these 2 particular books are about learning mindfulness and meditation practices, but being aware of the lives that we live in and how that might take shape. And so not only are they quite beautifully written and really approachable, it doesn't feel like a really didactic, yeah, you should take out 3 hours every day and you should sit in a perfectly quiet room and nobody should disturb you when you enter this mode, and this is what should happen to you, this is what you should achieve by doing things like meditation. Instead, it's like, sometimes you have kids running around and they're making loads of noise, you're in a busy workplace, or you only have 10 seconds to yourself that in order for you to practice this just for a moment, and that all of these things are okay, and that it doesn't mean that you've done any less by trying to engage in this. So I suppose while I was being introduced both through therapy and both through my own reading to this kind of practice, I found those 2 books very useful.
Good.
Love that.
I could see us all just sat there going, that's incredible. I'm going to move that, Joe, because I'm going to put that there. We can't see it when Dr. Chris is speaking, because I think only until his best, you say.
You can see my tea though.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. No, I think I could see us all just engrossed, couldn't we? All of us. Oh, do you want to go first? You'll go first, Joe.
I think it was just the way that you said it. I was just some of the words I didn't even hear, because you said so eloquently about what a book did and how it made an impact in your life as well as the sort of therapeutic side of things that you was going through at the same time. So you talked about almost like that 10-second, having 10 seconds to do something. Is that something that you now practice on a daily basis, or do you let that slip a little bit and have to pull things back, or have you got yourself in a real routine with practicing mindfulness?
Bit of both. Do I manage to keep a consistent routine of having a break for a little while? And I'm just going to do a few breaths and try and focus my attention on that or on my surroundings. Definitely not. I would never pretend otherwise. Like, I think I got into a really good routine when I was younger, probably off the back of acceptance commitment therapy. But I suppose that practice slipped. What I used to do was I used to have a different job while I was at university as a student, where I got into this habit of, when I do sitting breathing, I can't think of anything other than the fact that my back's aching, because it just starts to after the first couple of minutes. And again, I didn't think it was acceptable. I didn't think it's like it counts as meditating just to lie either on the floor or on the sofa or anything like that. And so I got into this habit of, I would have my alarm set for when I had to go to work, and I'd get ready as quickly as I could in the morning. And whatever time I have left, I'm not doing anything else. So I've got that time to just lay and breathe and do my best and try not to fall back to sleep. And so that was my routine for quite a long time. That would admittedly slip for the very reason of me being so anxious to go to work, that eventually that panic was winning. It was actually starting to overtake the time that I would normally have to do some meditation. And now, obviously, my routine's at a completely different shape. I remember when I'm feeling particularly anxious to pause for a second and see if I can reconnect more with the external world a little bit. But in the second part of my answer would be, even if your practice does slip, you don't always have the time, or you don't always remember, or whatever it is, to do a few sessions of just focused breathing, for example, it's still like that kind of remembering to be mindful seeps into everyday life. So one of the things that people say, I think Kabat-Zinn says at points in his book as well, is you might just be washing the dishes, you might be cleaning the house, you might be hugging your partner, you might be putting your shoes on, or anything like that. You still have an opportunity then, for many people a better opportunity, because they like to be doing something whilst meditating, to really pay attention to the feel of everything, what you can smell, what you can hear, focus on the quality of the light, anything that your senses can take note of, and to focus on that for a moment is all really useful. So I think you start catching yourself doing it, particularly in my case, when I start to feel anxious, or when like obsessive tendencies are starting to take over. I will try and remember to think, oh yeah, I can, like, how do my shoes feel whilst I'm walking right now? And isn't it funny how the texture of the floor changes how I can feel it even through the soles of my feet? And you start thinking about stuff like that, and then you think, oh, that was at least 2 seconds that I wasn't thinking obsessive thoughts or something.
Yeah.
That's a victory.
Yeah, and it is a victory, because it just reminds me, I've practiced mindfulness for years, and me and you have had this debate many times, and I just take you back to a point where he was like, my back's aching and things. And I went to I'm trying to think of the name of the place, at Pocklington. There's like a Buddhist monastery there. And weirdly, I heard there was a speaker speaking there, and I thought, I'll take my mum there because they do cream teas as well in the garden. And it just so happened that I booked on this like retreat for a day, and there's this famous speaking there, but I didn't realise that this retreat had been going on for 4 days, and this was like the epitome of this big ceremony. So we rock up there, and like everyone's in the orange gowns and the robes, and someone took me to a side and said, just so you know, this is like the last sort of like main part of the ceremony, and you don't appear to be part of this sort of faith, but just letting you know what you walk into. And I was like, well, Ian, let's just be part of it. And the monk in there started talking on about different stories, and started talking about the mind being like an ocean. And he started saying that what meditation does is it like gets you jump into the ocean and go underwater. And he said, but most people, the backs might hurt, something might hurt, and they come back up and think that they can't stay under that ocean. He said, but we've got to remember is it's like going in a submarine, and we can go as deep as we want. But the problem is, the deeper you get, you start seeing shipwrecks, and most people get scared and come back up. I thought, and this just got me thinking when you were saying that there is, I practice meditating, but exactly like you mentioned, sometimes I class it as a win. If I try and do it 3 times a week, that is my goal. I always try and do it 3 times a week. Sometimes I do it more, sometimes less. But exactly like you mentioned, the old word is practice. That's it. Even if you just go sit there, and I've done the same with you, where I've lied down at times. But the new one I've got into at the minute is 10 breaths by moving my hands in the air, right, like this. And I know it sounds mad, but you take the breaths through your nose. I physically can't think of anything else while I'm doing the breaths and doing that. And it just, for some reason, it's been my new little go-to thing.
So your hands signify that's a
The
full
breath.
breath,
So
and then it's coming out.
Yeah, so you,
Yeah. Interesting.
And you do 10 banks of 10,
Yeah.
so 30 of them, and then you see if you can just meditate for a bit like that, and you just bring that in. And the idea or the science behind it that I'd learned, it was a Tony Robbins thing actually I'd learned it from, is you're changing your physiology because you're moving your body. When we all move our body, things change, but you're also focused on your breathing as well, and you're forcing the breath through your nose, so there's technically more carbon dioxide building up, so that tends to calm your heart down, and it just stops you thinking, which is for me the whole point of meditating. But you want to talk something? We've debated this lots, haven't we?
Yeah, and to be fair, I'm not consistent with meditation, and I struggle. But when we've done it, and we've gone to the gym and we've laid on a mat in the gym, and we've meditated for 5-10 minutes.
No, we're doing 15 minutes, and what I've done with
15
Paul is
minutes.
he said, "Oh, we can't meditate," so we'll go to the gym, do a workout, and I think it's a good little tip for you, because I normally fall asleep at meditating a lot of times. But if you learn your back, put your knees up, and you lift your arm up, and you leave your elbow up, and you keep one elbow up, when you start falling asleep, your elbow drops and it wakes you up. So we've done it a couple of times at
And
the
I've
gym.
thoroughly enjoyed it, and I have switched off, and it has really helped me, but I'm not consistent of it. But mindfulness, I've just come back from holiday, and I get anxious travel. So going and coming back, I get really bad anxiety. So what I did, I went for a walk on holiday and sat on the seafront just by myself, and I just was in the moment. I was really mindful of, because it spoils my last 2 days of my holiday. My anxiety kicks in. So I just took myself out of it and was really mindful of the moment and enjoyed it. And it just took all that away. And it's something that I've developed over time. But years ago, I'd spoil the last 2 days of my holiday because the anxiety had built up and I'd get bad tempered and just a ratty. But now, because I'm more aware, I seem to have conquered that a little bit more. But going on to meditating, I like it when I do it. I'm just not consistent at doing it, which hopefully I'll get better.
Those are two great books. I'm gonna jump into the next question. So, what is feel good song or music that gets you focused and makes you happy?
Oh Christ! So I've made quite a few notes on this because I listen to a lot of music and I didn't know where to begin with this one or what sort of music I should really class as feel good or focus. So anyway, I made a bit of a list. I like my feel good music. I normally go to like rap music that I can play really loud.
I'm a fan. Yeah, I'm a fan.
I also quite emotionally the like intense kind of music that, because I found it sort of having the catharsis to go through something that's quite hard. It's quite cleansing, makes you feel quite better after that as well. For focus or like a happy place, I don't know. I actually listen to really noisy music, like no lyrics, not often no like beats or anything like that. I just want something that's almost all consuming. I suppose in a similar vein to meditation, like blocking all external noises out. There's a duo of musicians from Bristol called Fuck Buttons who were around in 2008. Then they did an album in 2009, then an album in 2013. And despite the name of the band, they actually provided some of the music for the 2012 Olympics.
Right.
But then, but for the album, they had to change it to F Buttons, just because they probably thought, no, we can't
cool,
sort of
then.
show that. But they just make noise music, and it's quite brutal and extremely loud. And I find if I need to, I don't know, retreat into a kind of sound. I suppose I like all three of their albums equally, particularly the first album, which is called Street Horsing. I can just turn that on, and I found it so hard to get into for months and months because I thought this is everything I hate about music. It's so headache inducing, it's so loud and horrible. But then I just found it more and more kind of comforting and like not only do I just love it as a piece of music, but it's also just so enveloping. And
Is that when you're working as well? Because you're a creative, so
it's when I'm working, yeah, but it's also, I think I find myself going back to it when I'm driving, when I'm just at home and I need like a loud noise to swallow me for a while. So yeah, while I'm working, while I'm writing in particular, I listen to stuff like that. I also, and there's tons of other similar stuff. That's my I suppose my favorite. And I also make my own music as well. I always have done because I always wanted to. I always just do it because it's fun for me. No one else listens to it. It's just for myself. But I started, especially when I was younger, being sick of there not being any music I could listen to write because I'd be starting to write and then someone would have the nerve to start singing. I'm like, oh crap, I can't listen to that anymore. Or like a drum beat would start, or some kind of a melody would be too distracting, so I couldn't do that anymore. Or it would be too ambient to actually do the trick of being like distracting enough, but enough to, like I said, kind of swallow me.
I think because I've read this on creative writers, and I don't know if any of you guys suffer this, but for many years I used to work all over on trains and travel a lot, and I used to have a lot of meetings in Starbucks and things like that down in London. And what I found really struggled with, I struggle writing emails anyway because I'm dyslexic, right? But I would write a lot of my emails in cafes or on trains. And when I moved into this business and I started having my own office space, I found it so difficult to write. So I started listening to white noise.
Yeah.
Because it helps me concentrate more. And I've never shared that with you guys, have I?
What's white noise?
White noise is just noise.
Like a fan or
Like a fan or a
Right.
hissing, or you can get playlists on it. And it just got me so intrigued with you saying that because you're a creative writer. And the best way I can describe it is in like when I have to write, sometimes I have to read, I have to put a lot of effort in, and I'll maybe read out loud. But if I've got a noise there, I got taught how to speed read and to read a bit faster because I struggled. But the way they teach you to speed read is to hum. And the reason they teach you to hum is because when you're reading, we tend to the cat sat on the mat, and we actually vocalize it, and we can only read as fast as what we vocalize in our heads. So I was getting taught to read a bit better, and it just happens to be a speed reading coach. It started teaching me to hum while I read, and actually you'll do it all the time. So you must read some magazines. What type of magazines do you read, Joe? Hello. Or you're into your rugby and you're into all different stuff. There'll all be a topic that we all read. And because we read a lot of that same topic, or you think of some of the reports you read, very heavy reports, and we all read them, you're able to pick out the key headlines when it might take me reading that same report, maybe a couple of hours to read. And what it was just saying about if you can zone out your own voice in your own head, you can read faster. So I started using white noise for that, but I find it fascinating that you use the same principle to be creative.
Yeah, and I think white noise, I love white noise as well. And I think there's, like you're saying about playlists, you can find stuff on YouTube that's 10 hours of factory machinery, or 10 hours of like a washing machine going round.
I like rain for some reason.
I like rain on a car roof.
Yeah,
is a really popular one.
Mine's caravan roof.
Caravan roof.
Caravan roof. Yeah.
But yeah, and they've got millions and millions of views because people share that. They might put it on and go to sleep, or whilst they're working or something.
Many people that talk about it, I can see you can amazed by this, don't you?
Well, I'm going to try it because I'm quite the opposite. I have a fan on night time because of the menopause. So I do have a fan on, and I find that really quite soothing. My husband hates it, but I quite like it. But when I'm working during the day, I can't have anything on. So like I do try and put the TV on, or try and put a radio on or something, and I manage it for about a minute, and then I'm done. I just can't do it. I just cannot concentrate. So I'm just wondering if perhaps that would be more helpful to me, because sometimes it's quite lonely and quite isolating when you're sat in a room for four days a week. Working on your own. And you talked about reading reports. I cannot read reports. I have to print them off. I have to have paper.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I cannot retain the information.
Yep.
And I find that I'm reading line after line, and I think that's something. So for all you menopausal women out there, or perimenopausal, I think this is something that's really impacted going through my menopause. So you asked me about the question about what magazines do I read. I actually read very little because I can't nowadays. I just do not feel like I have the concentration to read something, even if it's something nice. And for the first time, just over a week, I was waiting for my son to play ice hockey, so I popped into a pub. I had a glass of wine. I sat in front of the fire. I ran across to the charity shop and bought myself a book. And it's the first time I've been able to read in ages. And I felt so thrilled afterwards because I'm just struggling. So I'm going to try the white noise. But when I was listening to Chris at first and he's talking about this really loud music, I was thinking, I'm getting a headache just thinking about that. And
I think it's just different variations of it. And I think I found myself, like, I like rain. I listen to rain a lot. But there's even like some playlists I've found. But I think the key point, which I've never realised this until you've just triggered me into thinking this, the songs sort of never start and never finish, so they never distract you, if that makes sense. But they're sort of comforting while you're there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's some natural, more of a natural kind of
natural, like you're in a cafe, you're in a buzz, but you're not distracted. So try that, check that out.
Because weirdly enough, if I'm on a train or if I'm in anywhere busy, it doesn't bother me whatsoever. I can just zone out from everybody and get on with my work, and it doesn't distract me at all. So I'm going to try that. Thank you.
There you go, little tip.
I'm going to wait with the next question. Right, Chris, what purchase of £50 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months?
I got a little shopping list here for everybody.
Oh,
So I think until 6 months ago, more or less, maybe a year ago. I don't think I would have had any answer for this whatsoever. I wouldn't know what would be positively impacting. But recently, after I think I got it for Christmas, last Christmas, not the one that's just passed, I got one of those diffusers that you put in a room and you put oils in it, and it releases this really nice smell. And I just absolutely love it. I got this like quite lavendery kind of smelling oil that you drip into it, and not only does it make noise for a start, so it like makes this like gurgle and humming, like churning noise whilst it's happening, but this mist comes out and it smells of. In my case, I love the smell of stuff like lavender, but there's a million things you can put in it, so it's whatever works for you. And I'm really bad at shunning any kind of help without really trying it. I can't like so when someone would sometimes say, "Have you ever tried?" I don't know anything about things like aromatherapy. Nor can I speak to how effective it is in general. But something that is tactile, whether you touch it or smell it or whatever it is, it's just like a physical sensation, and whether that can help you and distract you or calm you down. I didn't realize how effective it was until I would just lie on my bed and smell something as nice as that and hear something. So it has had this like very positive effect. And obviously you can pick those up for well under 50 quid. And things like a candle, those like crackling candles and stuff like that. So it's making this very quiet noise whilst also giving off like a really nice smell. You can pick them up in Asda for a couple of quid. Or the other thing, a weighted blanket. Someone was telling, I was actually working with a
I've
student.
been hearing
who
about these
recommended
actually.
that.
I've heard these a couple of times at Man Club come up. Have you heard about these?
I've heard about a weighted blanket, yeah.
Go on, do you want to share?
But again, a student recommended it to me about a year ago, and I said, "Oh, cool," sort of thing. And I don't know why I don't try more things, especially when like it's not too much money just to give it a go. So anyway, I got one for Christmas. Christmas just gone, and I think in a period where I was actually very stressed, I laid underneath. I just fell asleep for about 2 or 3 hours straight away. Because it feels really weird. It's like someone's turned up gravity or something. So it has this quite.
Well, I know the science behind this because I thought I'm a bit like you, I like to research. And part of the science with a weighted blanket, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, being a mother, what's it called when you wrap a baby real tight? Is it swaddle?
Swaddle.
Swaddling, yeah.
So do you know when you swaddle a baby and it feels all
Yeah.
comfy
Yeah.
and all
And safe.
and safe? What they say is a weighted blanket has that same psychological effect on you in terms of it wraps you in, it keeps you nice and tight, and you're nice and safe. And I've been hearing loads and loads of reviews of them, and everyone just speaking about how amazing they are for sleep. So I think you've heard of them.
Yeah, I have heard of them, but I've never tried them, but I might.
Yeah.
Because that sounds really good. And it sounds like almost like you just need that clock. So that replica of the heartbeat and stuff, that kind of ticking or something that would go with it. And it just sounds like it'd be absolute perfection.
No, but I think the key bit though, what I'm picking up, Chris, is I've had one of them in the air purifiers. My mum's a trained aromatherapy, so for years she's always been into, she's a Reiki healer and she does aromatherapy, Indian head massage, right? So I've always had I had one on yesterday, an Indian head massage, and half an hour worth of my mum just pampering, right? Feel amazing from it. But
That sounds awesome.
but she's always been, I'll look you up, but she's always been really big into smells in terms of what it can do. So for me, what's their little go-to for me? So she gives me to sleep. It's exactly like you mentioned, lavender.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've ever tried it. And I'm real creative when I have this. I put orange oil
Mm.
and a bit of orange oil in the corner when I'm writing or reading. It just sets me up for the day. It gives me loads of energy. So I think aromatherapy, I think it's huge, isn't it? And I think we all have that, don't we? It's like the science when you sell a house, you're meant to put a fresh loaf of
Fresh
bread
bread.
and
Yeah,
some
fresh bread,
and some coffee.
coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it is absolutely huge as well.
Well, it triggers the memory more than anything, olfactory senses. So
Yes.
you think, by extension, why shouldn't it also help you either return to a more relaxed state or whatever it is if you use the right smell? So yeah, I can see why it'd be really helpful.
And an Indian head massage.
Oh, they're incredible, Joe.
They're just
I never told you
my
this.
favourite. No,
Oh, I need to
I
hook
have
you up with
never
my mum. She's
known.
incredible.
I mean, my friend
She-
Claire Law, I do go to. She is amazing, but Claire, I'm sorry, I might have to try Leon's mum. But head massage.
She knows she's
is my
retired. She's got this
go-to.
little cottage thing, little room in the back. You go in, she's got some nice music going on, and she tells me if I don't go once a month for one, I'm in trouble. But it just chills me. It just gets me back in the zone. So one of my superpowers. You
great.
didn't know that, did you?
No, I didn't.
All right. I'll have to look you up. You have to go. I think we should go for the next one, Joe.
Oh gosh, yeah. Okay, so do you have a lesson from a failure of yours?
I think so. Yeah, I think I've got a couple actually, and the first one I think it's a tried and true sort of thing that I think a lot of us may have struggled with is simply not talking to people is a lesson. I don't want to, or at least I get told not to be too hard on oneself about not doing so. But I just think sometimes I think of how many years it could have saved and how much it could have saved in terms of struggling both for myself and for those around me if anybody kind of knew what the hell was going on. Like I spent the first, like I said, 20 years of my life in complete secrecy about my own anxiety and OCD and depression. And because I didn't know what any of it was. I don't think there was the same kind of awareness that there is today. I didn't know what it was. I was keeping it deathly secret because I was so ashamed of it. Nobody, not even my parents, my partner at the time, anyone like that, were being let in at all. So all they could view was my behavior, which was avoidant and deceptive, because I'd tell someone I was going somewhere, but I'd actually go and hide somewhere else, or I'd drop out of something at the last minute. I'd never have a good reason. So it would always, obviously, when someone's making excuses, so that's all they'd ever hear me doing is like wiggling out of things, making excuses, seemingly uninterested in things. I think today people would maybe know the red flags a little bit more, but I don't know what exactly it is I would have said, because the first time I actually did see a professional, it was very hard to really say what the matter was, because you start talking about symptoms, whereas in reality, the symptoms, I suppose, could be other things as well, because you don't quite know what it is that's happening. But I don't think it would be a stretch to say if I would have managed to at least say something's really wrong. I seem to be finding it really hard to go places. I'm finding it really hard to do this and do that, and I can't quite explain why. Or whenever I want to go somewhere, it makes me sick. I don't know where that would have got me, but I feel like it would have gotten me further than I was at the time, and especially in terms of my relationship with like my family and my friends and my girlfriend and things like that, because it wasn't ever fair on them and it made things much harder for me. It slowed what could have been progress in theory. So I think that would be one of my lessons. But interestingly, it's something I still don't do enough. I mean, I'm talking about mental health
today.
here, so
Yeah.
it's great that I do that, but I still think I hold back a lot of things, especially, I suppose, if there's ever a chance not to disclose a real reason for something, I will take that option. I sometimes think in some of the therapies that I've had, I find it so kind of embarrassing and upsetting, the kind of things that I think about, that I've held back with that as well. So I've gotten much better about it. I talk openly about it. I talk to other people about it. I speak at university about it, written a book about it. So there's really, in many ways, it feels like there's not much left for me to put on the table about it. But it's much easier than it used to be, but it will always be tremendously difficult. So I try and remind myself of that as a kind of a lesson, I suppose, to learn from whenever I am conscious, hang on a sec, I'm keeping this from somebody for the purpose of it being easier to do that than it is to say something. And would it be easier if I said a little bit more?
I think I feel quite sad listening to the fact that you went through the first 20 years without being able to tell anybody. That makes me feel quite sad, really. But I don't know how much things have really changed, Chris. I know things are out there now, but what I hear on a daily basis, we talk, and we've just set up this emotional wellbeing hub at the country park. And the reason that we've set up that is because I consistently get told that people either they don't understand how they're feeling. So we've stopped using those kind of terms like anxiety, depression, because actually it doesn't always mean something to somebody. So let's try and get away from that kind of mental health terminology.
I think the challenge though, in it, Joe, is like the work we do in the Man Club. It is just a conversation, and it is around your feelings. And I think the challenge that you mentioned about the therapies and your book, The Fear Talking, the true story of young manly anxiety, right? I think even though you say you wish you'd talked sooner, I don't think the world would have had a book as good as that if you had to talk sooner. So there's always a yin and a yang, right? But I think the challenge is, Joe, is to call this out a bit is, it's only in the last 4 or 5 years we have started to make it a bit safe to talk and have conversations. Technically, me and you were talking through the Man Club, but that's how we started that initial conversation, right? And I do think we have got to get away from, we label too much. Let's take it away from mental health. If we just say, me with dyslexia, I actually don't think I have dyslexia. I just think my brain just works a little bit different to what someone would say was normal. But I use the word dyslexia just to give someone a context of what I can do, right? I don't say I've got dyslexia. It takes me a lot of effort to do certain tasks. That's it, right? But I think we're so quick to label, and then also I think we people want to know reasons why. And I think we're so complicated as a human being. There's a million reasons why we can be having a bad day, isn't there? But if it's always been in our culture to, certainly for men I'll speak from, the number of times I hear man up and get on with it, pull yourself together, all these words, it's been bestowed on us men for years and years. So I think we've only just started speaking in the last 4 or 5 years about it. I think we've got so much more work to do about them toxic phrases and the way we label things. And then I also think using things like, it's back to that phrase, like you say, we've got to be nice to people. We've got to start being nice. We've got to have a place where people can go without fear, burden, or embarrassment to actually disclose if they don't want to go somewhere because they're not feeling great. And I don't always solve that. What are you thinking, Paul? I see you nodding.
Well, what Chris stated earlier resonates so much with myself. And I didn't talk for years and years. You know yourself, Leon was there at my lowest. But now I do get where we do the man club. I go into companies and organizations and see so much passion now from the employees and the employers that they want to create change. They want to make a really positive mental health and culture within the business so people can come out and talk, not only to the bosses, but to the person stood next to them. And we don't talk about our feelings and our emotions enough, but we are getting better because I'm seeing it I see it on a daily basis where people have the passion to create the change and to show, not talk about football, rugby and all that, talk about the feelings and the emotions. And I always say if I could bottle it, the passion that I see on a daily basis, I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah, and I think it's changing. And I think, like you mentioned, sad. I think it's such a positive that we are starting to see this change.
Yeah, I'm not taking it away from that, but it just saddens me. I've been in mental health for 35 years.
You see how
And
indoctrinated
it saddens me that somebody 20 years of their life has been so difficult because they couldn't have that conversation. That's what makes me feel sad.
Yeah, I get that.
And it's not in a patronizing way.
No.
But I know that there's still people out there that are still finding that conversation really difficult because I hear it on a daily basis. And yes, things are changing, but it's taking such a long time. And still people are stopping themselves. Chris has said that himself. I know that I don't always reach out when I need some support and help. And we all do at times.
Yeah.
But it's those times, and I hear it at First Ladies. Oh, I haven't been because I've not been feeling well. But that's the thing.
Need to go, yeah, I know.
So we get into that thing because we just don't allow ourselves, we're not kind to ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves at those times when we're really struggling to reach out for help. We do it when we're feeling a bit better, when we've done all that white noise stuff and the aromatherapy and the blah, blah, blah. And then we go, oh, okay. Do you know? So I want us to get to that place where actually we can say to our peers, our colleagues, whoever at that time, I'm having a tough day. I'm having a tough couple of days. Let's just talk.
There's something. I'm well aware, like you said, about when the book was set when I was younger, about people not knowing as much back then, and the original reason I wrote it was because I said I wanted to write the book that I wish someone could have handed me when I was that age, because it's not about anxiety, if you know what I mean. It's not like a guidebook or anything like that. It's just the equivalent of hearing someone else saying, yeah, me as well, this is my experience, and hopefully somebody younger could be reading that, and it's all kind of, or parents of someone younger or anything like that, and all those little ticks are like, yeah, he or she does that, or something similar at least. And I think one of the reasons why it's so hard to say something is because I always say that fears, so whether it's like anxiety or in my case OCD as well, it has this like double blackmail, as I word it. So not only are you afraid of doing something because you're afraid of a certain outcome or afraid of certain thing happening that's out of your control, or perhaps you feel like you have to do something or else something will happen, or et cetera, et cetera. So not only is that happening, but you're off the things that you're afraid of, and the things that you're thinking about tend to be, they're not like these, like in inverted commas, like noble thoughts and fears that you have. They're often really embarrassing, and they're often really, whether about yourself or somebody else, and they're humiliating to even think of sharing what it is you're afraid of, let alone you also then have that fear that's always happening of that thing happening. So it just got you in these by two different sort of short hairs at once,
like a vicious cycle.
Yeah. So you don't want to, with me, for example, I will say so much, but I never go fully into the things that I'm thinking about or that I'm afraid of, because they're just, to me, they're just so strange, and they're so humiliating, and they're so personal that sometimes when someone says, "Oh, people need to talk more," or something, I think, well, who the hell would want to hear what I've got to say? So I almost censor it a little bit. I almost try and be quite abstract. Like you were saying, it's easier to give it just a little title because then you don't have to go into all
Yeah.
the stuff about
No,
it.
but I think this is when me and you was talking off air really about the Man Club. You was intrigued about the Man Club and what I'd shared there. And I don't know how you build this into the NHS, because I think this is where I don't think you can ever build this into NHS. Is the reason why the Man Club works is so effective. And Paul, jumping at any point on this is them. We say these three things: weakness, burden, or embarrassment. Right? And men don't share because of them three things. And that's what I heard you to talk about then. But I think what happens at the Man Club, though, is because people are not so different levels of the journey. So someone might come through and the first question is, what's your name, one positive reason why you're here? Some guys have said, I've got a rope in my car, I was going to take me all life. That's how they open, right? We've had it countless times, right? So we've got that level coming in, and we might have Paul coming back in who's on top of the world from where he's been, right? But they all share the different weaknesses and embarrassment. And the only way I can maybe coin it is, it's okay to talk about them things that them three things that you might say is weird or embarrassing to you. Someone else will go, well, you think that's embarrassing? I used to talk about this and I used to be scared of this. And all of a sudden you've got this real unique flow where everybody's accepting everybody else, but nobody's fixing anybody else. And that's the bit where I don't ever think the NHS can help in that sense, because you've got a lot of people who have got lived experience supporting another person who's got lived experience, and just actually sharing stories like around a campfire. And that is the essence of what we're doing. I can see you nodding, Joe. Do you want to add to that?
And I think that's just perfect, Leon. I think that works. That's why Man Club and Ladies Club work, because you do just allow people to talk, and that's the right place and the right venue for those people. When you're coming into the NHS, I guess it should be when it's at that crisis kind of point, and those with severe mental illness. So that's when the NHS really, that's
into its own,
that's when it comes into its own, when you start having those kind of talking therapies, those treatments that might really help somebody that's maybe been through some trauma or something, really dig deep and really look at what's been going on for that individual. But the rest of it, we're just trying to get through life, aren't we? And those are the people that are attending Man Club. Yes, they may say they've got a rope in the car or whatever that might be, but what's been the trigger for them? And often that's around kind of, it might be about a relationship, it might be financial debt, gambling, drugs, alcohol. They don't need to go see a mental health professional per se at that point. But actually to be able to go share your story. And I think what you said, which was more important, was that nobody's going to kind of sit there in judgment. They're going to say, do you know what, you think that's weird, mate? Listen to my story. Because actually, when you say it out loud, it's never as weird as what you're holding in your head.
No, I think it all comes down to this point, doesn't it? When you're vulnerable and you are vulnerable, I think the only way I can coin it is, I think you take away the power from that vulnerability, because once you've said it and you've been at your weakest point, and I always say this, when people do share and they feel like they're being vulnerable and they feel like they're being weak, I'm like, that's the most powerful, courageous thing you could ever do.
And you probably don't get it on the first night. They'll turn up 3 or 4 weeks and then they get comfortable in their environment. They get comfortable that other guys are sharing their experiences. They get comfortable that they're not going to be judged. And it might be the 2nd, 3rd, 4th week when they've arrived, and then they'll open up, and then it's bang. The reason I'm like I am, the reason I'm suffering is because of this. And I go back to culture, and we've created that culture where it's a non-judgmental environment where nobody gets judged. And like I say, when I'm going into companies and organizations now, it won't happen overnight. You've got to build that culture, and that's what we're doing. It's got to be safe. And people have got to know that whatever's said in that room stays there, unless there's a safeguarding issue, right? But we create that culture, and we don't do anything. I always say we don't do anything special, but people outside say we do. And it's just giving people that chance to talk. And it's really important to listen as well. Listening to somebody's as critical as talking, because you need to be in the moment with them. You need to really, because we don't have mobile phones. Where can we spend 2 hours without your mobile phone or any distractions apart from listening to the next person next to you?
It's the only time you're off social media.
What are you on about?
I'm just saying. I'm going to the next one. Scheduled. No, yes, the air schedule. So, what is a favourite quote or saying? If you could share with everyone in the world, what is it and why?
Right, this is really annoying, and I've let myself down here because I had it's in my wallet, and I got my wallet out in the car. Like, here we go. I need to bring this in with me.
It's all right. We've got time. We can fill, can't we?
Yeah.
We can even edit this out so we can make it
If
look.
you can edit it out, I'll go get it. 'Cause it'll be far more impressive if I say I'll tell you what the quote is and get it straight out. So if you give me
Go
2
get it.
seconds,
Go
I'll
get it. Go get it. Hurry.
I'm
Look,
so
good,
glad.
Sam.
I'm so glad you've
It's not
said I
like-
can go get it because otherwise I'd have tried to remember it.
It's good. We've got time.
No.
I'll try and make it worth it.
I should tell Zoe the time.
Didn't he? We was having a chat off air, John. What he was saying about his life, it was like a mirror
Right. For you.
for me,
Yeah.
and about avoidance and not talking. And it was like when he was, and I just read some of his clippets and I wrote it out. Sharing experiences is so important to him. Sharing my experience is so important to me, and helping others helps me. See, it's tough. When he was telling me this before you come in, I was like, yeah,
Can I borrow your pen? Yeah, that really.
yeah, it was.
I just need to. Yeah. Joe Bell's going to come in as well.
Testing.
I'll get you back.
Yep.
Testing.
Making sure it's still recording. Testing. Right. So moving on. So, what is a favourite quote or saying that if you could share with everyone in the world, what is it and why?
Okay, so here's my quote, and it's one that I've kept in my wallet, and I wanted to get it out just for authenticity's sake. I think I got this in about 2010, maybe 2011.
So got a
This
history of
has
it.
been in there for a long time. It's by an author called Christopher Vogler, who wrote a book called The Writer's Journey. I was at university studying writing, and this was one of the books was recommended to do with structuring a story and such. And it often refers to like films and things like that in order for it to be more recognizable for the reader. But anyway, it guides you through it. And at one point, there was a section that said, it seems that every time you try to make a major change in your life, these inner demons rise up to their full force, not necessarily to stop you, but to test if you are really determined to accept the challenge of change.
Right, like it.
There we go.
Very good.
And the reason I really like that quote is it's obviously speaks to me in that when something is really difficult, it doesn't necessarily mean that the feelings of fear are to make you stop, per se, and to not go into retreat or whatever, but rather to make you ask yourself, how much do I really want this, and how kind of what am I willing to fight against in order to go there? So I think for me, it gives me a little bit of a sort of a fighting spirit when it comes to tackling these thoughts.
I love it.
I
Love
like
it.
that.
Love it.
Love that.
We're going next, Paul.
Where we're going next. In the last 5 years, what new habit or belief has had the most profound effect on your life?
So with me, the most recent therapy that I had was in 2018, I think it was, when I was at probably the worst point I'd ever been in terms of my anxiety. And they'd kind of run out of things to do with me. So like it was about 17 months, I think it is, I waited for treatment. And the last few months of that, it was me bouncing around lots of different kind of practitioners who each would have offered a certain type of therapy, and I would talk to them in like an initial consultation. Then they'd say, "Oh, damn it, yeah, you've already, you remember this type of therapy from last time," or something, so it wouldn't be very effective as a top up or something. But anyway, in the end, I landed on a therapist who said what she thought that I needed was like a kind of a compassion based therapy. And because she said, what I'm understanding, you have this really crippling anxiety problem, and that it's kind of really completely taken over your life. But it sounds like you have a lot of self-loathing, and that is not helping you whatsoever. That is like one of the things that are really doing you a lot of damage. And again, I'd never considered it that way. I know that I have a lot of problems with absolutely hating myself, particularly when I'm aware I'm letting other people down, which is all the time. But I've never thought of it as contributing to the problem itself. So I went into this form of therapy. The way she worded it, which was really embarrassing at first, was to kind of divide myself into three. So there's this like childlike part of me, there's the responsible adult part of me, and then there's this protective figure as well. And those are termed in many different ways depending on who's talking about it or what you're referencing. And in her opinion, my protective figure, who was trying to kind of help me get out of these situations that are causing the three of us so much difficulty and so much pain, he kind of no longer trusts the responsible adult part of me, and so he's very tyrannical, and he's the one who's making me do all these different things in order to make myself safe. And it's this kind of cycle, to cut it short, is what's causing a lot of the issues that I have with kind of resenting myself, because he's sick of me, the feelings that I'm making the three of us feel. So I had to start pretending I was having a conversation with him, saying, and I felt really stupid at first, but it was not battling back, not saying, screw you, stop making me feel this way. I really appreciate that you're looking out for me, but if I get into this situation and I am ill, or I can't cope with it, or I feel like I can't cope with it, I'll manage. Or between us, we'll manage. I know that I will do this and either remove myself from the situation or simply endure it whilst I'm there. And it will be okay. We'll get through it together. So you're starting to kind of reassure that part of yourself that you're able to cope with things that you don't normally think that you can. So that, obviously, it starts off as you literally enact it, but eventually it turns into just kind of this inner, like, reminding yourself.
Like a process.
Yeah, you think, if this happens, the thing that I'm afraid of happening, it'll suck. But at the end of the day, I'll live and I'll be able to cope with it. And that sounds so reductive, but it's a thought I just couldn't do at the
No,
time.
but you say it sounds reductive. I've been a huge fan of the chimp products for years.
Yeah.
And I talk to myself. I have a tattoo of a chimp on my arm, and I have countless conversations with myself. And we say it like the other way, don't we? We mentioned this at the Man Club. Sometimes I call it Little Leon. Little Leon, he's scared of everything and worried about everything. And I have to say, come on, Little Leon, don't worry. Big Leon's got your back. We're going to be fine. We're going to get through it, because I think you got to reflect like that. And I think I'm hearing a lot more of that sort of self-reflection. If you are, John, if it's normal to do that, but I think we do have to have words with ourselves, because we can all catastrophize. We can all, but I actually think that's our superpower. You know, the reason why we've survived so long as we have on this planet is because we do catastrophize. Because we've no longer got a T-Rex chasing us, we've got these other things that are chasing us, and that's just part of our human DNA, and it should be celebrated more. I think. I can see you nodding, Paul.
I think you're totally right in what you're saying. When I suffer with anxiety or I'm catastrophizing something, I have to have a word with little Paul. And I know that what I'm thinking, when it actually happens, it's nowhere near as bad as I made it out in my head. And so over the years, I still get them thoughts, and I still get them thoughts on a daily basis. But I'm getting there now where I can control it. I have a word with little Paul, and we say, look, it's going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to be as bad. And it doesn't. And the more that happens, the better I get.
Yeah.
Because I know it's not going to be that bad.
I love that. Love that. Where are we going next, Joe?
We're going on to the next question.
I like this one.
So, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself at 18? And what advice should you have ignored?
Right. I think, well, what the kind of response that I've noted is a little bit what we touched on before, where is because to me, with any mental health struggle that you're going through, knowledge is power. I've always found. So since I started actually being diagnosed with something about sort of early adulthood, I was just starting to not only like really absorb the learning that I could get within therapy, but also start reading up about these things as well. Because it doesn't fix anything, it doesn't make you better per se, but it means that you can start recognizing what's happening. It's not this like horrible, not knowing what's going on. You're thinking more about this noticing symptoms than you are underlying reasons for it. You can instead start seeing, here I go again, feeling this feeling because of this. And because it's a little bit more recognizable, a little bit more about it, and you're familiar with it, it does take a big edge off, I think, what it is that you're experiencing. It doesn't stop like panic or anything like that, but at least there isn't the additional panic of not knowing why or what's going on or the reason for that. But since the question is, what advice would you give yourself when I was 18? As I said before, when I was 18, I didn't really know what was going on. So if I was to say something that I would recommend to any younger person now, don't be afraid to hit the library, start Googling, talk to a professional, sort of really start to be a student of what it is that you're experiencing, because the more you learn about it, the better. If I'd have said that to my younger self, he would have said, well, what is it that I'm experiencing? So what is it that I look for in the library? So maybe the base camp isn't just saying go out there and research. I think the very foundations come back to what we were saying before about talking to somebody. So what I would have said at the time when I was 18 would have been to talk to who was my girlfriend at the time, who cared a lot about me and who knew a lot more than I ever gave credit for, because I was obviously doing my best to be very secretive. So my advice would be to let someone who cares for you and who's trustworthy in a little bit. I think if you're privileged enough, as I was, to have someone who cared about you and would listen, whether it's a family member, whether it's a partner, whether it's a sibling, a friend, whoever it is, I think that can be the very foundation of what happens, because then again you are starting to learn a little bit more about yourself through talking and perhaps through their response as well. And I think because it's so hard as well, we also was talking about this kind of talking about pull yourself together and suck it up and stuff like that. I think we have it drilled into us as well, that when you say talk to someone, it means sitting in this really intense way. Listen, I need to speak to you kind of thing. And you like go into a room and it's really like eye to eye and intense, as though it's shameful to instead text, or instead just write it down, or at least just break that first ice saying there's something really the matter here. And then you've done that first leap. You've done what is that really hard jumping off the diving board already. So I think one of the things I would say to younger people as well today is to not feel like when you say talk to somebody, it has to be that kind of sit down one-to-one, face-to-face kind of thing. You can begin those conversations via text, maybe write it down and hand it to somebody, whatever it is you need to do in order to be able to do it, even if it then means someone else says, hey, I got your text, and then you can initiate that conversation. Then starts from someone else.
Yeah,
it's already begun.
Yeah. Put the wheels in motion. Yeah, like that.
So yeah, I think it's cliched, but it just needs to be hammered home endlessly that it's good to talk to somebody. So yeah, and seeking advice as well. I think I wouldn't advise anybody to necessarily to seek advice or to forge kind of bonds on things like social media per se, because even though there can be a lot of good advice out there, I think you have to find it in amongst a lot of bad advice and a lot of toxic environments. So I think that's neither a good nor a bad thing. My advice for people who are like searching for things online is not to take things in blindly, but instead to always take things with a pinch of salt.
I'll help you on that a bit. Let's say the Man Club then. Research about what we'll see online, but physically show up and go be inquisitive, aren't you? And
inquisitive,
yeah,
exactly.
and get inquisitive about the subject in different ways. So take digital media on, go see a talk, try loads of different mediums to get to that end result. I think I was taking for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hear different people's opinions, really question, I suppose, like search yourself a little bit as well. You think, well, how does that advice kind of sit with me? Does that actually sound like something that would be useful to me? Does it sound hard, but it would have a good outcome at the end of it? Or does it sound hard and actually wouldn't be useful to me at all? And yeah, make sure that you're in an environment that's useful to you.
Yeah, I like that. So where I'm going to go with this as well, and next one is, so reading your book and listening to you growing up, at times it felt, when I was reading that, you felt burnt out, unfocused at times, unenergized, overwhelmed. So what is it that you do now to combat that?
The main thing that I've kept going now since I was 15 is the gym. I've now gone for more of my life than I haven't, which is
It's a good start.
it's a cool milestone that I crossed. I often joke that you wouldn't think it looking at me because I'm still relatively slim despite lifting weights all these years.
You're a
but-
CrossFitter, by the way, as well, aren't you?
I'm a powerlifter.
Yeah, power.
Yeah, but it's because of anxiety. I can't eat enough. I find it very difficult to eat anything full stop. And I'm constantly fighting not to lose weight very quickly. That's why sort of someone will say like, oh, do you work out? Yeah, working out. Oh, how long? Probably expecting me to say a few months kind of thing. But I'm just like, 17 years, something now. But I do it because it's really useful to me. I think any exercise, whether you like to run, whether you like to cycle, lift weights, swim, whatever it is, really good at, because you get really frustrated. I suppose you start picturing the things that are troubling you and you feel like you're kind of fighting back against it a little bit and you push that a little bit harder and it has that really good kind of catharsis to it. And I think it is that benefit. And I think it doesn't hurt to feel a bit better about yourself for doing those kind of things because you feel awful about yourself for the rest of the time. So any little help that might do to make you feel a bit better is worth its weight as well. Ironically, it's helpful in that respect, but it's also very difficult because I find it very difficult to go. There's been times in my life where I used to spend I'd go to the gym later and later because I was so anxious. It'd take me so long to get to the point where I was able to go that I was eventually going just before it closed. They like locked they you could still, as if you went in, it's okay, but the door then locks for let anyone else in, and it'd be right up at closing time. Within 2 minutes to go, I'd like screech up and go inside. And now that they flicked it to being 24 hours, you just have a key. I was going in at like 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, even though I was then having to get up at 6 in the morning to go to work or whatever, just because it took that long to go. But I still valued it enough to force myself, if that makes sense. I think even last night and the night before, actually, I was like having small under the surface kind of panic attacks whilst being there. But so it's it's very useful to me, but everything I do is very difficult. So it always will be that as well.
Love it. Which gym do you go to?
Gym in Barton. I live in Barton upon
Oh, Barton, yeah.
There's a gym called Shape Changers, and you just get like a key fob.
Whenever you want.
Yeah, whenever you want, any time. Because obviously there's a lot of folk who might work shifts, and the only time they can go is 4 a.m. when they would be awake. So it's helpful. Yeah.
I was in the gym today, this morning.
Very good.
Yeah,
It's
Andy morning.
I can't do more.
But I've been on holiday for 3 weeks, so I needed to. Is it my next question?
It is.
It is. Right then, Chris, who in the world would you like to interview, past, present, and why?
Right. I felt like I should have something really intellectual to say at this point, or at least something really interesting to say. And I've thought about this question since we spoke a week or so ago. And I was just thinking famous figures to do with like mental health, figures to do with writing. Oh, what are the really good authors I've read? Yeah, but what would I want to ask them? I don't really know what I'd want to ask them. And then I suppose thinking about trying to focus on the more simple things is I just completely copped out and thought, you know what, I'd maybe just want to talk to an animal. Something.
We've had loads of the first one. I like it.
Something that's really simple. Like I've been running around my house, not running literally, but like pacing, stressed, starting to I'm like sweating, I'm ill, and there's something happening, and I'm just terrified. And I'll sometimes just catch like my cat will just be laid on the bed, just sprawled out, just oh, life is so good, and just so. And I just sometimes think, what is it you think? What is it that's because you clearly just so comfortable and you don't have anywhere to be or anything to worry about in particular. What is that? And I almost just want to pick the brains of like a cat or a dog or something. So yeah, I wish there was some magical way of us tapping into that.
It's my favourite movie as well, Dr. Doodle.
Yeah.
It would be, wouldn't it? Because it's that case that they're just starfishing, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's not a care in the world. But that is we've never had that answer before. Very brilliant answer. You've definitely won that one. So that's it. We've got through an hour, Joe. Last question.
Yeah, so this one kind of splits into a couple, actually.
Yeah.
I like to take advantage while I can. So one of the things that we ask, and I think this is really important, especially for where you work, it's around the talk suicide training that we do. So the www.talksuicide.co.uk. So that 20-minute training to help save our lives. So it's about spotting the signs. I think probably quite
Yeah,
familiar with
yeah.
it, with the train, but just really getting out to all students, really, just to enable them to be able to have a conversation. We're saying we're encouraging people to talk, so now we need people to be able to listen and to have that conversation if people come and talk to us.
That does that, doesn't
So
it?
what better way to do that? I'm going to ask this question and then I'm going to come back with another question.
All right.
So, is there anything we should have asked but didn't?
I can't think of anything particular that you should have asked.
Where can we find the book? Name of the book.
Oh, the name of the book, of
I'll help
course.
you there.
Yeah, yeah. Any opportunity to recommend that? And yeah, the book is called The Fear Talking. It's published by Barbican Press. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Waterstones, and so like just the most popular places you should be able to find it.
That's great. And we've actually met previously, but it was a couple of years ago, and we were both running a workshop, and COVID hit, and the workshops stopped after that. But they're opening up very soon. I think March is our first one. Do you want to just tell people a little bit about that workshop?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole idea of the workshops, it's much like what you've been talking about, Paul, where it's the idea of equipping workplaces to deal with the event that someone has taken their life. Through our research and through the interviews that we've been doing in the intervening 2 years, that we've been interested in is the phenomenon of contagion from suicide, how one can unfortunately kind of lead to another, how when a suicide happens, we don't seem to have many things in place as to what we say about it, what we do about it, how we speak to one another about it, how someone who is very affected by it, where they go, any kind of standardized support in that case. I think many sort of companies, many businesses, many organizations really struggle when that happens because a lot of people whose job was never predicted that it would have anything to do with that all of a sudden involves somebody either within your workforce or a student or anyone like that, or someone close to somebody who does work there, for example, who has taken the life. I think you suddenly have quite a lot of responsibility on your shoulders for maybe people who are coming to you saying, what do we do now? Or there's lots of people who want to talk about this.
And I think the point you're making there is we talk about this at Man Club. That was set up to support families because of the devastation that a death by suicide causes. I think what's really awesome to hear that these workshops that you're doing is, yeah, it affects families, but also works. I like a work family and there's a community there. So it sounds amazing, and I'd love to learn more about that, Joe.
Yeah, I think we're actually about out now because we put it out there, and I think within a day, nearly everyone in the workshops had gone, but we will be running more.
We'll put some notes on the blog, and I think we'll get a blog post put about it, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And these first 4 sessions that we're doing at Hull, York, Scarborough and Scunthorpe we to think these are kind of pilots that will eventually,
a lot more.
we'll be able to.
Sounds awesome.
Like continue to roll it out into other places. So yeah, fingers crossed it will be something we can continue to do.
And can I just add on there, Leon? I know it's just going to come in just because we've talked about that subject and it's really difficult for people to hear. If anybody is struggling or they're being affected by a suicide, we have the Together service, and you can find them on the Mind website. So if anybody wants to go to that and they need support, that service is open.
And we'll put the links to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it's been actually nominated for a HSJ award, so we're finalists for a award.
Well done.
So just
Wonderful.
Start putting there because I can. So no, I just want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on, because we just had a bit of a conversation about how you can help, and I said let's get the podcast and we'll see where it goes. And just been incredible for sharing your story. So thanks for that, and keep being you. How do you add into that?
No, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll be seeing you really soon to do our workshops.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.